Welcome to the journey of an aesthete, a comprehensive examination of all things aesthetic, the arts, the humanities, and what it means to be human.
All rise.
Elizabeth Willams, welcome to Journey of an Aesthete.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Mitch. Nice to speak to you.
Nice to finally speak to you. I usually do I try to do a brief introduction before we start talking, if you don't mind. It won't take too long. We have a lot of different kinds of guests on our show, encompassing the widest range of artistic accomplishment and endeavor. And sometimes the guests on our show are people that have done more than one art, or they've done things even outside of the arts. And some guests, of course, are people I know personally. Some I have never met, and some I only know their work. I sort of decided to have you on the show because I think it's an important part of the arts. I would say arts that are somewhere in between the utilitarian or for the fine art. They sort of straddle those worlds. And you're somebody that's you're somebody that's has had many careers, and I love, if you don't mind, talking about the fashion stuff as well, because you work with Bob Mackie, which is extraordinary. But I guess you're probably most famous to our listeners from some of the very, very, shall we say, high-profile trials in the country or the world. And so, for example, Epstein and Weinstein and this person from Mexico, El Chapo, and many other cases, very notorious cases. So what I thought we would do is do what we normally do, is sort of a linear chronology, if you don't mind, and sort of discuss how you developed your immense skill in illustration and drawing and the different places it's taken you, as well as talk a little bit about crime, because I confess I haven't mentioned this to my audience before, but I'm a partial true crime buff. I don't go as far as the late great Michelle McNamara. I'm not an amateur sleuth like she was, and I'm not as hardcore as she was. But it is an interest, and I was very interested. My interest actually started with Dominck Dunne.
Strauss-Kahn?
No.
DSK?
No, Dominck Dunne and his daughter being killed.
Oh, Dominck Dunne.
Yes.
Oh, his daughter?
Yes, and that was that.
The mom made on death?
Absolutely. And so that researching that case in particular is what got me interested in criminal psychology. And it's just one of my hobbies, but I don't want to bore anybody too much. But welcome, Elizabeth, and if you don't mind, discuss your journey becoming this kind of illustrator, a very particular genre, a very particular style. And how you start wherever you want to. You could start from youth or whatever's on your mind.
Oh, okay. Just quick question. How long do we have for the interview? I mean, how long do you want for the interview? I'll try to make my comments brief. I just want to have a sense of what timeline we're looking at.
Well, believe it or not, that's your call. You're the guest, and the guest is the boss. So if you tell me that we only have an half hour, we only have an half hour. I mean, I'd love to talk to you for 90 minutes or an hour, but that's me.
Okay.
So
that's great. No, that's fine. I mean, I can edit it back, or I can expand on certain subjects, whatever you like. I just want to accommodate whatever your confines are. It's fine for me. I've got all the time for you that you need.
That's beautiful. So you have a lot to say, and we really want to hear it. So start wherever you feel is important to start.
Well, what I'll do is I'll just start with, very briefly, when I was growing up, my mother would bring home or would occasionally buy the New York Times. And I grew up in a very small little town in central New York.
Yeah.
And there wasn't much here, but she would bring home the New York Times, and this was in the 60s, when the New York Times was filled with illustrations, fashion illustrations, of the likes of, your listeners may not know these names, but Fred Greenhill, Kenneth Paul Block,
Yes.
Saad Blackman. These illustrators were top-notch in their field, and the drawings I was always enamored with those drawings. And then she would take me to the public library in the nearest city,
Mm-hmm.
and I would go through the rack, the books on art, and I found a book called Illustrating Fashion.
Mm.
And I took that out of the library, and I just loved that. And that was my passion and my love, and it still is, quite frankly, to this day. I love drawing people, number one, and I love clothes and fashion, number two. And so when I went to college, I got several awards from the Scholastic Arts competition, and one was to Washington University in St. Louis Art School.
That's a great.
And then
That's a really.
yeah,
That's a really.
yeah. It's a very good university, but I wanted to go to Parsons School of Design because they had a great illustration department, and in particular, they had a great fashion illustration department with people of the likes of Steven Stippleman and John Gundelfinger and top-notch illustrators were teaching there, real professional illustrators.
Yep.
But my parents said, no, you have to, they said you have to go to a real university first. And they finally agreed that I would go for 2 years to this regular university, and then I could transfer. I think they thought that I wouldn't really do it. But I waited my 2 years, and I studied lots of drawing, some painting, because Washington University really, it's a school of fine art.
Mm-hmm.
They had a fashion design program, but I did not want to be a fashion designer. I wanted to be an illustrator. So they had a pretty strong drawing department.
Hmm.
And I took advantage of that. But then after 2 years, I transferred, much to their chagrin, to Parsons as agreed upon. And there I worked and I studied under some really wonderful illustrators. I mean, they were, top in their field. And it was an amazing experience. And I think that it was great to go to a, typical university, but it can't meet the same standards at a art school where they hire professional illustrators and they're really working in the field, and they can really give you insight into what art directors are looking for, and they give you more of a business sense, because at the end of the day, this is a business, and I didn't want to become a fine artist, quite frankly, for just the mere fact that I'm much more interested in, as you said, the how did you call it, the utilitarian side of things.
Well,
I've always
hold that thought.
I like that.
What I wanted to say, and I don't feel I expressed it as accurately as I would have liked, because this is all spontaneous and improvised. I'm not working from notes, but there are art forms that I think straddle. They don't fit into categories as much as people want to put them into categories. So a good example is your drawings of these very famous trials. They are to me superb illustrations, and so they're both fine art, but they serve. They're also used when you see documentary or the 6 o'clock news. When you report, they're also used in a very utilitarian, prosaic context. And I'm I'm interested in the fact that they can be both. while we're on
Right.
while we're on that subject, do you mind? One of my favorite illustrators of all time is Lawrence Fellows from the 30s. And
Lawrence Fellows.
yeah, he drew on men's suits mostly, men's suits, men's sport coats of the 1930s for Esquire magazine and for Apparel Arts.
I've heard of him. I've heard of him. And I did some men's fashion illustrations.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I did some, and these are the guys who, this is very much the type of illustrations that these are a little bit tighter than what I like. And these are really very specific, but I love this stuff.
Oh, it's great.
That's the thing. And you know something, these could be courtroom illustrations because guess what? They're men in suits. Yeah. And so they're standing, might as well have a man in a suit, you know, pointing to a jury. And at the end of the day,
right.
My fashion background, drawing men's fashions, really helped me in the courtroom because I'm very sensitive to the structure of a jacket.
Wow.
The lapel. Is the suit vented or not?
Right.
What's the tie like?
Yeah.
And all men's fashions are very detail oriented. In other words, women's fashions can be very expressive. And I don't know if you remember Joe Eula. Joe Eula, who worked for the New York Times. And he would draw the fashion shows. And I've done a couple of these. And I also did a Bob Mackie fashion show. You can draw some of these extraordinary outfits that women wear with a very almost abstract expressionist approach. You cannot really do that with men's suits. Okay, you can, I guess, but generally speaking, men's suits, it's very important to understand the structure of it. So that helps me in the courtroom, no question about it. You really, I mean, for example, drawing John Gotti and and you know, in his sartorial splendor and his Brion suit. And then I drew Paul Castellano, the man he rubbed out prior to that. I'll never forget Paul Castellano, who was
talk a little bit about both those trials, if you don't mind. I mean, that's.
Castellano was head of the Gambino crime family in 1984 in New York City, and he was a big, tall, man who commanded a great presence. And I'll never forget him walking into this federal courtroom, one of the ceremonial federal courtrooms in 40 Center Street in Lower Manhattan, having a gigantic, big stogie in his mouth, wearing a big top coat, and I'm not sure if he had his hat on or not, but he had a hat.
Oh, sure.
And then you would see the flip side of this was, and Paul Castellano was, balding and had a very Romanesque profile. And then there was John Gotti, who was soft and the beautiful tailored jacket, a top coat over the double-breasted jacket with the Brioni, what kind of tie did he wear? I can't remember the name of it. But, anyway,
he most likely would have worn, he could have worn custom bespoke ties by one of the Italian, there's an Italian maker in France, in Italy he might have used, or Brioni.
I never flavor Brioni.
Yeah.
Brioni suit. But, those things, these are fashion statements by these men.
Yeah.
And so it ties in, it really does tie in to what I learned and how I use it in courtrooms. I mean, for example, I'll never forget with Harvey Weinstein. He was looking over he used to slump his right arm over the back of his chair, and we were sitting to his right in the first row. No, first row, are you kidding me? We were in the third row back. But sometimes he would sort of turn towards the right and put his arm behind the chair. And I'll never forget, his jacket fell open one day. Yeah. And I see he had these little clip-on suspenders. Oh, yeah. It was almost comedic. The little clip-on, and they were red. I drew it. I talked to my photo editor. I said, my God, he's wearing clip-on suspenders. The elastic clip-on suspenders. Here's Harvey Weinstein. So I drew this, and then the next time I saw him in court, he made sure to let us all see that he had the nice, button-up ones, thick and nice. But he was a suspender guy. It's interesting. At any rate, those things, I find those things interesting, and they tell the story about the person.
Huh. Well, in the case of Harvey Weinstein, who's somebody I am no expert on. I didn't follow that case as closely as many did. He always looked terribly in how he presented himself. I mean, he always to me had a kind of a real sloppiness. Casual to the point of disreputable appearance. Even before I knew what he did as a man, as a person, almost as if there was almost as if the outer reflected the condition of the poor condition of his character in some sense. And I always found, this is just my opinion, I always thought he looked like some of the worst dressers in Silicon Valley. To me, I don't know. You probably know more about that.
He was not interested in well-tailored suits, that's for sure. Yeah. But that's at least what we saw. Yeah. Who knows what he would really dress like if he was going to an awards banquet, or who knows? But he got arraigned. He was wearing a light blue, I believe it was V-neck sweater, and a jacket, pair of blue jeans, and a blazer. I mean, that's just how he presented. I don't know if it's because everybody, it's weird. I mean, people choose their clothes, I think, and what makes them comfortable and how they want people to perceive them.
That's right. That's true.
So, and some people are more attuned to that than others. So he was probably more attuned to movie stories and content like that than fiction. I don't know. I'm with you. I really never some of these. I go from case to case to case to case. So I can't really kind of study each case.
Oh, of course. No, that's not you. You can't do that. You have a whole other.
I'm sorry.
You have a whole other job you have to do. You have to do representational drawings of these people in very unusual circumstances, in a courtroom. That in itself is probably very, I would imagine, is an exacting art form. And you have to focus on that. You can't be bothered with some other things, I don't think. But
that's for sure.
But do you mind rewinding a little bit and talking about the great Bob Mackey, because you worked with him?
Well, I did not work with him. I actually got that high in the organization. I worked with I worked in his atelier. I worked with Rhett Turner. And then I also did drawings for him. I guess, I worked he used to be in a atelier called Elizabeth Courtney on Melrose Avenue. Mm-hmm. And that's where Bob Mackey complicated. And Bob Mackey had Rhett Turner, who did other designs. If I guess the Starlet couldn't get Mackey, they would use Rhett. But I worked there and did drawings for them. Mm-hmm. Mackey was an amazing illustrator on his own, and he really didn't need an illustrator to draw for him. Mm. But I did also work for his name Travis. He designed for Liberace, and it's not Ray Travis. It was
it couldn't be Travis Banton, because that's a different.
No, it wasn't Travis Banton. Yeah. It was
too old.
I'll find it. His name was Michael Travis. That's
Michael
right.
Travis, yeah.
Michael Travis. I did. I remember drawing a couple of blue. I remember specifically drawing a blue feathered cape for Liberace once.
Wow.
And I know you like those things. Michael Travis was one of the nicest men you ever wanted to meet. He was just a lovely, lovely man. Uh-huh. And anyway, so I worked for him, but as a freelance illustrator in Hollywood. And then I worked for several others. And honestly, what was happening was it really wasn't the kind of fashion illustration I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to do what they were doing in Women's Wear Daily and drawings for the New York Times. I wanted to do more advertising fashion work, and I wanted to do stuff I wanted to get hired to draw fashion shows and things like that. That's a very tall order for a young illustrator, okay?
Yeah.
And a person who's not connected. And I went out to Los Angeles by myself alone. I knew no one.
That's fantastic. And do you mind?
I went out.
Do you mind telling me what year that was when you went out there, or what was it?
78, 79.
Those were the years, right? That's when everything was happening.
Well, I mean, it could have been happening, but I was so young and so green, I didn't know it, and I went out there to do some postgraduate work and, try to. Possibly, I was thinking about maybe I'll get my master's. I wasn't sure, but I wanted to study with an illustrator out there who was teaching it. I think at the time, where was she teaching? I can't remember. Her name was Eva Roberts. She was a great fashion illustration teacher, and she was the one. And anyway, so bottom line is I had a bunch of crappy jobs. Yeah. I was going to these classes. I was working for these designers, and I couldn't make ends meet, and it wasn't a good strategy. And I realized that this was not taking me the place that I wanted to go, and my parents were getting a little bit annoyed with me. And so Eva suggested that I go see she thought that I sort of had a natural knack for getting a likeness, which I never even thought about, ever. Doing portraits was the last thing I thought on my mind. But anyway, she said, you have a knack for that. You should look into courtroom illustration. And quite frankly, when I was at Parsons, nobody in the general illustration department, nobody ever wanted to be a courtroom illustrator, because to those teachers and to those students, it was kind of like the lowest rung of illustration you could possibly do. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because there's no art director generally directing it, okay? You're hired by a news person who just needs an illustrator, and generally people would get hired because they knew someone, not because they were so skilled at drawing from life. Okay, so what happens is, and you still see this happen and occur in the general illustration, in the courtroom illustration field, is you have a wide range of quality. Okay, you've got some people who are superb, like Bill Robles, and then you've got other people who are really not up to the task too much, and BuzzFeed and these places make fun of them. So the problem was that there were fewer of those, the good people. Look, at least when I was studying, the people who I saw in New York, who we would see in New York, like the New York Times people, artists, they really were kind of not to the same level as, for example, the illustrator you were talking about, Warren Fellows.
Yeah,
okay?
I happen to love Fellows, but
they weren't even close to that.
Oh, okay.
So that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to do that.
Yes.
But I was desperate enough, and she said, go down and look at this Courtroom Art show in San Diego. So I drove all the way down there, and I saw the work of Bill Rowe, and that changed my life.
That changed
because that totally changed my life. Because I said to myself, my God, this is gorgeous drawing. This is just gorgeous illustration. This is what I want. I'll do this. If Courtroom Illustration can be this, well then, okay. All right. Then I got something. I mean, there's some hope here. And so I then, because quite frankly, the other two people on the show were mediocre again, just a bunch of, it was nothing that I just didn't, it just wasn't. I mean, I hate to be mean, but I'm not being mean. I'm just being honest. It's like, to be a great draftsman is like incredibly challenging, and it takes a lot of dedication to the craft and talent to get that way. And he happens to be one of the greats, hands down. So, okay, so fast forward a year after this, and still struggling along, and I'm working on, trying to get a portfolio together of courtroom art and working for these various fashion illustrators and selling pantyhose at Magnet. And then I worked in I was here and there and everywhere. Anyway, so I went down to the courthouse on Temple Street where they tried O.J. Simpson. And then I went to the courthouse in Santa Monica where they also tried O.J. Simpson. I would travel all around. Anyway, point is, I wasn't getting anywhere because I tried to get in. I would try to call the news desk. I would try to call people and see if I could send my portfolio. People wouldn't even listen to me. Sometimes people would hang the phone up on me. Anyway, so I'll never forget. I was at sitting in one of the courtrooms down on Temple Street, and one of the court officers came up to me and he said, you might want to come down here when there's actually a court case that somebody wants to cover the news business. I thought, oh, wow, yeah, because, the Hillside Strangler is going to be here next week.
You drew him?
So we can come down then. Sorry?
Wow, you drew him?
Well, not really. I was there when that happened, but they never, anyway, but what happened? My first case, I think, was a child molester. But the thing is that when I was down there at that day when they had the Hillside Strangler hearing, Bill Robles was there. So I knew what he looked like because in that show, there was a little video of him. And I saw him on the hallway. And I was incredibly shy at the time.
So you're meeting your hero. This is the man who
I was meeting my hero, and I'll never forget it. So, but fear is a good motivator because I was getting really scared that I wasn't going to be able to pull this off, And my parents were like, come back home to our little town, basically give up. And I remember walking across the hallway and talking to him. I was, oh, God, I'll never forget that. Oh, God. And I had my little drawings in my portfolio, and I showed them to him. But, you're not half bad. Let me introduce you to the reporter here. Who's here for the thing. Maybe, they can introduce you to the assignment editor. And that's how I got first job.
That's a beautiful story. It's a story about I guess perseverance and courage, I guess, and And
fear.
well, but there's also isn't courage have fear attached to it in some sense, or?
Yes, it does. Yes, I guess it does. Courage has to overcome fear for it to be successful.
Do you mind talking a little bit more about the greatness of this particular illustrator? What he did that others didn't do, or either in terms of
what he did, what he does, he still does it.
Okay.
His drawings. I saw the show were included in that show were drawings of Marvin Mitchell. No, Lee Marvin.
Oh, yeah.
And at my shell trio, there was some sort of a palimony suit they had.
I remember.
Lee Marvin, Ernie Marvin, and Charles Manson was in there. I can't remember what else, but they're extraordinary. Okay, they're drawn beautifully from life, not copied from photographs in the studio. That's a different kind of art. Okay, you can take photographs and use it as photo reference and make a beautiful drawing in your studio, and everything's comfortable and it's predictable, and you know how to do what you're going to do, and you get it done that way. And some people, they trace the photographs. That's a well-known secret in the illustration field, okay? And they get things done beautifully, and that's fine. It's a different world when you're working from life, and you have no photographs, and you have nothing in front of you to guide you, and you have a piece of paper, and you have the person. You have Charles Manson sitting there.
Yes.
And he did these beautifully drawn, right? Very strong draftsmanship, incredible lightness, incredible. And gesture and the design of the drawing, designing the drawing as you're doing it. In other words, these drawings of Lee Marvin that were not cartoonish, they were just caricatured. I mean, you're using the length of his face to try to, capture a gesture, and designing the two figures together to make a great composition. And all this is done on the fly. All this is done while people are moving in front of you. And then the careful use of color. Very important.
Okay.
And so these things are not easy. It looks easy, but it's not. And then, it looks easy to a young person, and then so I tried to do what Bill did. I tried the markers. I tried all this stuff. Of course, it never went anywhere because I couldn't do what he did. I mean, I didn't have skills at that point in time to be able to go up against him. I mean, I did try. I mean, getting really good at drawing takes a long time. And by the way, I'm still trying. I mean, it's not easy. It doesn't just it's not like falling off a log. It takes a certain amount of concentration and thought and observation to do it well. It's never that easy. I don't find it easy. I'm challenged by it. Still to this day.
Still, clearly, at least in my view, you became one of the masters in this field, and you and again, I'm somebody who's an outsider. I can't draw, so I don't have any preconceptions about what's easy or what's hard. It all looks difficult to me. I can't imagine. Well, I mean, partly because of how do you deal with the distraction of court and all the emotional. Well, do you mind talking a little bit about the content of what you're drawing in terms of the things that people have done that are evil, or justice, or any of the other things, issues? It's a big topic, but I'm wondering what comes to mind, because you've covered a lot of emotionally difficult cases.
Okay. I'll tell you the one thing that you've got to bear in mind when you're doing this job. You've got to bear in mind always You're working for the news business, okay? And you have to develop a news sense. And you have to know when something is happening in court, what is important and what is going to be important to a news story.
Yep.
For example, if you see the first drawing I sent you, which is Harvey Weinstein after the verdict,
Yes.
he had been out on bail, and the judge said, "You're remanded. That's it. You're going into jail." Mm-hmm. Now, the two officers that are holding him up, and as he's shuffling into the lockup, they walked right over to him, and I couldn't see them put the handcuffs on him, but it was pretty fast. And then as he was kind of a little bit handicapped, so he was moving sort of slowly, thank God. And he sort of shuffled, but I had to lift him up a little bit and sort of, escort him out of the courtroom into the lockup. And that is a scene that is newsworthy because this man had remained free for all this time and had done all of these things. And this is an image that a news editor would want to have. So you got to understand the case enough so that when you go into a courtroom situation that you're going to know when you're seeing a newsworthy image and get it, okay? Mm-hmm. And then the second picture is the one of him in the wheelchair. Now, He had never been in a wheelchair. He'd always been using a walker. I don't know if you remember, there was an issue with his back. Mm-hmm. And he had back surgery or something like that. And when he was sentenced, the next time we saw him in court, he was in this wheelchair. Now, I've got a table, that I got that's obliterating parts of his leg, but I can see enough of that wheelchair and his white socks and his shoes with no shoelaces, so they don't allow shoelaces in prison. Mm. So what I'm going to do there is I'm just going to leave off the lower bodies of his attorneys who are seated next to him and focus on him and his wheelchair and his feet and his expression and his partially grown beard and his expression, which was palpable because he was looking right at me with those kind of dark eyes and that sort of almost dead-looking expression. So that was another thing that I thought was important. Now, the next one is Jeffrey Epstein. Mm-hmm. Jeffrey Epstein had just been arrested the day before on the tarmac of some little airport in New Jersey and was brought into court. And they put he was in prison scrubs when they brought him out to arraign him. Mm-hmm. And he put his arms on the table, and he had these little wiry arms and hands. Mm. So, and his hair was all askew. And I thought, this is a really interesting image of this guy. Plus his hands and what he had done with those hands. Mm. I thought, those women, well, there they are, right in between those lawyers, right out there. The next one actually is this Tekashi 69, this rapper, who testified against the two heads of the Bloods gang who were involved with him with a video that he did called Gummo. And I don't know if you can see on the what do you call it, the monitor, it's got Gummo. And he's being actually cross-examined by the defense attorney of one of the Bloods. I forget the guy's name, and how Takashi was so, well, I mean, he was very articulate on the stand, and he was very thoughtful and methodical about his testimony. And you see this guy, he's kind of really thinking things through, and he's got this, talking about this Gummo video. At any rate, and then the last one, it's less, it's not a key image, it's just Rex Tillerson being examined by his attorney, but the one below was a key point during the El Chapo sentencing, where he made his statement. That was the only time we heard him make a statement in court, and that's the money shot there. You got to get that. And I finally kind of got a good likeness of him, because getting likeness is a real challenge sometimes. I mean, some people are easy to draw, and others are not.
Interesting.
And Chapo, for me, was the challenge. His wife, on the other hand, was a beauty queen, and yeah. I was all teed up for that one because of all my experience drawing fashion women's faces.
Sure.
So all my entire youth. Anyway, so that's my long answer to your question.
Wow. What was an example of an earlier trial you covered where you felt, well, first of all, that you felt you were gaining insight into something about life or reality that you would not have gotten had you not been doing this work? You know, it could be insight into, crime.
All the time. I tell you the truth, hanging out in the courtroom, whether it's the case or it's not the case, watch it. Sometimes, like, for example, an arraignment court, arraignment parts, or wherever they are, wherever you are, one's a part, one's a court. It depends on which courthouse you're in, federal, state, whatever. You'll sit there for a long time, sometimes. And you see just life happening before you, and real, like, what stuff can really happen to people, but like real human tragedy and drama can happen. You spend hours waiting for somebody to come up and be arraigned. You see stuff all the time. And it, most people don't do this. So even if they're a jury, they're going to jury, they don't see that. And it does give me a great insight into the court system.
Interesting.
And a lot of respect for the judiciary, because I think that these people have to be, especially criminal judges and federal judges who hear criminal cases. I mean, it's tough. It's tough. And it's nonstop for these people all the time. It's tough. I've great right anyway. It's just, there's a lot of sad situations out there. I just, for example, did a whole bunch of drawings for Frontline about the immigration situation we covered it in El Paso, Texas.
Oh, wow.
I mean, God, you want to see about human tragedy and drama. These people who've, been through miles and miles of traveling the length of Mexico to get out. I mean, honest to God, makes you feel you're really lucky to be American. Okay. That is one sad situation there. And women with children. Yeah. So you get a lot of that. I mean, a lot of that. And at some point, it used to really get to me, Mitch. It used to really get to me. And I used to ask Howard Brody, who was many years my senior, how do you do it? How do you shut off? And he just would say, you just keep focused on your work. but he used to really impact me,
Yes.
frankly. Not so much anymore. Sometimes sometimes, I mean, I quite frankly, I covered the T-Mobile Sprint merger trial.
Huh.
It wasn't fall, I think, last year.
Yes.
And it was a nice break, or maybe the winter, fall. But anyway, before the pandemic, it was a nice break because it was a civil trial. It was fascinating, really fascinating to learn about the merge and the challenge to that by the state. And it didn't involve, that kind of human pathos and tragedy that so many of the things that I cover do.
Yes. But yet you said that T-Mobile was interesting.
I thought it was great. I thought it was a really interesting case. I thought it was just, I don't know. I'm the person who likes to I like to go to bankruptcy court. I think it's interesting to see what happens in bankruptcy court and happens to these corporations and how they are structured and things like that. I think that stuff's interesting. I mean, I know my colleagues all think that I'm crazy, but
they don't see your interest in white collar or financial.
Yeah, I like white collar crime. I think, well, not so much. I don't like white collar crime. I more the civil stuff, the civil cases, the bankruptcies, and like for example, when the economy tanked in 2008, and Chrysler went into bankruptcy, and that case that they were on a trial that lasted it was crazy. It was like a 3-day crazy trial, and they were in rushing to get it done so the judge could make a ruling in it. And we were in the bankruptcy court until midnight. It was just crazy. They had all these union officials in there explaining the union benefits, and then I'll never forget this. I thought was interesting. The chairman of the board, I think it was Cerebras, who controlled Chrysler before Fiat took over. I'll never forget them asking the chairman of the board of Cerebras Chrysler what a line of car that Chrysler owns has any value. And he said, there's only one, and it's Jeep. That was it.
The Jeep.
The rest of them, that was it. Yeah, Jeep.
So was the rest just bankrupt or junk, or what did he mean by that, or did she mean by that?
Well, they didn't have value.
Wow.
So I guess when they sold the Fiat, there must have been some deal struck with and I don't know the inner workings of that, but I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah,
that Chrysler's cars had sunk so low that they held very little value in the company.
Wow.
I don't know. Yeah, those things kind of interest me.
Were you able to cross paths with Dominck Dunne, the crime reporter?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, talk about him, because he's was a wonderful writer, and I guess any thoughts that come to mind of your meeting him over any period of time?
Well, I met him at the Dominck. I met him at the Martha Stewart trial.
Oh.
I met him at the Martha Stewart trial. I'm going to try to find this drawing I have of him, and I'll send it to you.
I'd love to see those drawings.
I can find it. I think. Oh God, where did I put all my? I'm in the midst of moving.
Oh boy! Yeah.
And I got I had all my flash drives. Maybe they're here.
Yeah.
I'm moving. I'm actually staying up with my brother right now, and we're trying to get the apartment ready to. I have to do some work on it to sell it.
Yeah.
So I'll have to go back and find that drawing I have of him
Everybody needs an anchor in life. You, me, just everybody. Anchor made this whole show possible. I'm immensely grateful to them. You too can use Anchor to make your own shows and create your own vision. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Well, I'm just curious more in terms of, he must have been helpful to speak with, because he was somebody, you said that it was at one point tough on you covering these emotionally, and he's somebody that had been through all that, and I think, and probably knew a little bit about what that's like, or I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think he definitely, okay, so Mulligan, I handed this to Mulligan. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can find this picture and send it to you. I did a drawing of him.
Oh, wow.
During Martha Stewart. Let's see if it's in here. Oh, there he is. Well, it's sort of not. Anyway, I'll send this to you right here. Okay. Let's see. Can I download this? All right. He's over here on the left-hand side during Martha Stewart's deliberations. Wait a minute. He was there during the whole trial. I think he did an article for Vanity Fair. Right?
Well, yeah, Vanity Fair was his major gig for 20 years in the 90s, and that was
I think
that was his
article. I don't know if he did a book or not, but I think he was there for Vanity Fair.
Yeah.
Anyway, that whole scene was just like, I think I said to a friend of mine that jury deliberations was like the best New York society cocktail party without the alcohol. I mean, it was like a who's who.
Wow.
I'm sorry?
Without the alcohol, so it was like a kind of a peek into a certain strat.
Oh, yeah.
New York, yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Now it's okay. So I'm going to send it to Mitch.
Yeah.
The one at inbox.com or the one at gmail.com?
Don't have to do it now. We're doing a show, but whatever's easiest for you. I just
okay, the Mitch Hampton at Gmail, right?
No, it's the other one, inbox. Yeah,
inbox.
That's okay. I guess I'm sort of wondering. I guess basically what he had to say, or I know he was someone who was, he was partial to the DA, had a bias, of course, because of his daughter's murder. And
in the Martha Stewart case?
No.
I don't know if he was a partial to the prosecutors.
I just mean in general.
I don't know if he was in Martha's case.
I don't know about
Martha's case. No. I thought he was pretty. I don't know. I didn't focus on him, so that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't a murder trial. It was just Martha. We just made some really bad errors and made some mistakes and got herself into some hot water and was, I think, poorly advised by her attorney. That's all. Right. That's my limited understanding of that case. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if Dunne was particularly partial to the, and I, quite frankly, I have to admit, I did not read his article afterwards. I moved on to another trial. So that's the thing, you sort of go in and you go out and you move on.
Well, what are your rules personally for what you will expose yourself to or not when you're drawing a trial? I imagine that there were codes or rules. Are there things you don't look at or you want to look at, or how do you mind me? Do you understand my question? So are there things that you, do you follow me?
Well, there are rules, but it's not like you're suggesting. I think there are rules that I have to deal with all the time. The AP guidelines, because I work for the AP.
Yeah.
And those guidelines really determine what I'm drawing, and you can't make up something. Okay.
Sure.
You just can't make it up. Now, some others don't have the same structure as the AT and do other things. We are really confined by reality. And if it looks like what it is, then that's what it is. Mm-hmm. You're not to make pictures that don't exist. And if somebody's on one side of the room, then you draw that one side of the room.
Right.
And you make another picture for another, person on the opposite side of the room. You don't mush them together for the convenience of your picture.
Right.
So you focused on what the reality is, and that is your guiding direction. And also, that's one of the reasons why I use the supplies, the materials that I use, because the type of oil paint stick and oil pastel I use make colors that are very close to the reality of what's before me. When you work in watercolor, it's very difficult to get that deep, rich brown, which is in so many courtrooms.
You read my mind, because my next question is going to be about 70s and 80s design, because these courtrooms all look very 1970s to me in the colors and is that true that there's a kind of everything's tan and brown and yellow and
some of them are tan and brown and some of them are dark colors. Dark.
Yeah.
Some of them have lots of wood. Oh Lord.
That's
the
what
one the T-Mobile trial, heavy duty wood. For example, the Takashi drawing that was drawn in a courthouse that was built, I believe, in the 30s, I think, in New York City. Mm-hmm. And those courtrooms have marble.
Oh, yeah.
Marble and wood. Heavy duty, dark, heavy. And so you have to replicate that. Yeah. It's important. You got to, as an artist, it's your responsibility to figure out how to do that and do that quickly so that you can meet the deadline, which is constantly turning over, because in a newswire service, the deadline's always running. It's always going. It's not like it used to be in the 80s, in the 90s even, when you had a 5, 6, 7 o'clock and sometimes a noon show. Now you've got news 24/7 and the internet and people's computers and their cell phones, and it's popping up all over the place. So that's why.
Well, that's true, but I guess that you're talking about very different periods of architecture. If you're discussing the building of the 30s, that's a much older. That's totally different than my mind is sort of the kind of a 70s, 80s courtroom always has a certain look.
That's right. You go to all different kinds of courtrooms, so you have to be prepared for all different kinds of backgrounds. So you have your colors, and you've got to know what colors you're going to be needing. The thing that can really screw you up, I'll tell you the truth, the thing that can really screw you up, 2 things.
Okay.
A lawyer's ties and a jury.
A lawyer's ties?
Jury comes and they've got and even if you're not drawing their face, somebody's wearing some bright purple. Oh my God, do I have bright purple? Now I actually bring white purple because you can't make purple, okay?
That's
can't.
Interesting.
You can't. Or like turquoise. Holy moly.
Or
turquoise. Teal turquoise, I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, or bright magenta. Oh. Yeah. So, that's the only, you can kind of prepare for those things that'll happen along the way. But generally, primarily, most attorneys wear a shade of gray or blue.
Sure.
Or brown, dark brown sometimes. The people out of the Northeast, people in California and the South and stuff can tend towards brown, beige, sometimes even light blue, seersucker, like that. The Northeast is always some, variation of gray, blue gray, brown gray,
Right.
always gray, some variation of gray.
I mean, I have you on this call, this episode, and I'm looking at what you just sent me. It's especially the drawing Team Martha.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful drawing. There's something, it's really hard for me to articulate it, but you have the people facing these opposite directions.
Isn't that funny?
Well, I guess it's funny, but it's there's a pathos to it. It's really, and there's that in the face. But also, you really do capture the ill-fitting or good-fitting clothes. Like I guess the guy on the left, his jacket's standing away, and it's not so good, or.
Yeah, it wasn't. That's exactly right. And the guy to the right was much more sartorial. He was a much more put together guy than the one on the left.
The difference. It's really interesting that you capture.
Well, I approached that, Mitch, more like I would approach a fashion drawing. I really did. Those were just drawings I did for myself.
Oh.
I could send those out. And then I don't know if you can see way on the far right, that's Bacanovic. He's standing at the rail of the courtroom. He always stood, the one particular bodyguard, the man in the baby blazer,
yes,
would always be right at the rail so nobody could come over and talk to her.
Yeah.
You see a little bit of her black with her blonde hair, Michael Bacanovic.
It's beautiful. I mean, you almost think, like, if I didn't know who that was, you could be, for all I know, that could be a side of Angie Dickinson or something, or Kim Novak. You don't know. Right? You just don't know. I mean, it's just really something. I do see the influence, though, in this, I have to say, of those 1930s, 40s illustrators that I know.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. I mean, then there was Carl Erickson. Eric, he went by the name of Eric. And then there was Rene Boucher was another one.
Mm-hmm.
No question. Those were my heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my heroes. Those artists in the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Yes.
No, hands down. Sapolsky, Felix Sapolsky from the UK. Mm. And let's see who else.
I don't know all the names like you do. I mean, you're.
Oh yeah, look up Felix. Felix Sapolsky did drawings of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth,
yeah,
and did a lot of drawings. And it was a marvelous illustrator. Also did some courtroom drawings, but it wasn't like in the news way.
Right.
And then did drawings for Fortune magazine and all over the place. And just, he was terrific. I mean, anyway, I loved all those guys. And so the thing about it is that the problem that I found also, just getting back to general illustration today so much, is that, and I really admire it now. I mean, I like some of the things that I see that are being done by younger illustrators a lot. I like the line drawings. I like, some computer generated things. Because most of them are done on iPads and with Photoshop and all that stuff. And I think they're very proficient. Mm-hmm. But one thing that I always loved was the hand-drawn, just the immediacy and the kind of sometimes the sort of awkwardness and the sort of inaccuracy of a hand-drawn drawing. You miss that with today's illustrations. I don't know. I mean, there's sort of an interesting element, something sometimes not being so perfect. And they tend to be very perfect now, as opposed to things back in the 40s, 50s. Anyway, I mean, I don't know if it makes any sense, but I like that kind of immediacy. I like that gesture. So,
well,
anyway.
the phrase that you mentioned that I think is so important, and I'm going to probably title the episode that is drawing from life. You draw from life, right? And
oh yeah, no question.
And I want to ask, if you don't mind, a little heavier question. Some of these cases that you have dealt with, you said your first case was a child molester. And then you have drawn people like Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein, and I think some serial killers, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I have.
What serial killers have you drawn? I don't. It would have been in the 90s, right?
Well, the 80s. I drew some. Yeah, that's a very disturbing collection of humans.
Yes.
Because, they prey upon the weak.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you, because I know you mentioned in earlier that you have these restrictions working for the AP, and you actually work with news services.
Yeah.
How much do you see what you do as performing a public service, or sort of, I don't know how. I don't know how.
No, I think that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you are. I mean, I think the news done right. The news done right, like really telling. That's why I just really like working for the AP, because I think the AP does the news done right. It's very it's not hysterical. It's straight, just the facts. Thank you very much. And I think just the facts is a public service.
Absolutely,
no question about it. And they have a very high standard of quality. And I'm very honored that they have me as one of their regular freelancers who does this type of work. I really am. It's great to have somebody hire you who has a very high standard for what they do. And I do think it's, it is a public service. It's a public service to also draw things accurately. I'm not trying to editorialize anything.
That's right.
The one thing I'm trying to do is get the image done correctly, the way it is before me, and get the likeness as best I can. And that's one of the things I particularly liked about the Harvey Weinstein picture of the back of his head, his back, because I was able to capture his body language, so you sort of saw it as him.
Yes.
You know what I mean? The way he kind of slumped over and his jacket kind of ill-fitting.
Oh, yeah.
That's him.
Yeah.
Or, a face. For example, Michael Cohen. Okay. Michael Cohen has a face like a Barbie doll. I'm not kidding. He has a face that can he's a man of a million expressions. Okay. And his face moves around like, I've never been so challenged with a likeness.
Really?
Really. I mean, El Chapo gave me a run for my money, but Michael Cohen. I still like post-traumatic stress disorder over that.
Really?
Because when he was pleading guilty, Michael Cohen walked into the courtroom being kind of defiant and almost recalcitrant. The first hearing of the Cohen case, he didn't even show up.
Oh,
and the judge said, excuse me, where's your client? Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, yes, he should come. All right. Yeah. We're not going to do this until your client shows up.
Oh, boy.
He shows up and he's got this temporary restraining order against the government.
Yeah.
And he was, the tough guy and all this. And then all of a sudden you sort of start to see him and his face and things not going so well for him. And so then finally when, the rubber meets the road and he's got to now plead guilty
Sure.
to all these charges,
Mm-hmm.
the roller coaster of emotion was running all over his face.
Mm-hmm.
So, you would see his face do all of these different things. And we were all, that's one thing court martial, if they're crying, you better get that. And, he didn't really cry, but he was on the verge and he would kind of go there and then not, and then he would be scared and then he would be, angry and then he would be sad. Holy moly. And you're trying to draw this all and get it to look like him.
Yes.
Okay. So that's your challenge.
That's right.
And what are you going to end landing upon that's going to really express to people what happened in that courtroom? And when it runs on the APC, it runs and it's there forever.
Forever.
So
The AP is its, you feel like the stakes are really high because it's AP, right?
Yes. No question. No question. It's different working for a television station. It's on the air for 2 seconds and it's gone. The AP is there forever.
Interesting.
You bet.
But you love the AP.
Oh, well.
But that's one of the things you love about it.
I do. They're the gold standard.
Yes.
That's why when I wrote that book, their guidelines are the gold standard for courtroom artists, and they should be for every courtroom artist, quite frankly. Everybody should do that.
Mm-hmm. Well,
you're a journalist first, then you're an artist. You're a journalist first, you're a fact finder first, then you're an artist. That's
right. Do you anticipate in the near future illustrating a former? Well, now that Trump, do you anticipate him being in New York cases, and you might be drawing him? Is that something that you?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what? Who knows? It's so interesting. You say to yourself, "As we're sitting here, what's going to be the next big case? What's going to be the next big thing?"
Yeah.
You just don't know. Honest to God, it's so, it's funny. So I just tell you, this is really nothing to do with anything, but it was so interesting. I'm up with my brother and he's got a bunch of stuff from my parents. My parents used to collect National Geographic. So one night I decided, I'm going to go look at one of these old National Geographics. I picked something up out of 1964.
What?
And lo and behold, here's an article written by Lyndon Johnson, the February of 64, talking about as a vice president, he was going all over Europe. And, Lyndon Johnson, no clue at all that, 10 months later, he was going to become president.
Yes.
And there was going to be the assassination of Kennedy.
Yeah.
So you just don't know.
Yeah,
you do not know. The one thing I've always said is people make plans and God laughs.
That's funny.
So I just go with, you go with the flow. That's the one thing I've learned to do.
Well,
whatever happens.
When is it that how does that work when you do find out? Do you get, now are you in the middle of going to do something, or what? If you don't, what's happening right now for you in terms of Kate courts or?
Well, I'm doing some private client stuff. I've done some virtual stuff, but basically, it's pretty dead right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it'll pick up, I think, in the fall. Things will start to pick up, but things are pretty dead right now. It's okay. I've been through times like this before.
Mm-hmm.
I come and they go, So it's, it doesn't, I've done this so many years. I've been in it so long that dry spells don't get me all worked up. The one thing I have learned is when things are going well, save your money because things not then go so well.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So
well, there's a lot of wisdom in that. I mean, even listeners that don't do your, I'm sure many listeners can probably glean a lot from that and apply things in life, or.
The one thing about life, the only thing it can predict, it's going to change.
That's true.
It's going to change. So it's just best when, don't always assume when it's going great, it's going to continue, because something will change and then it won't. And so you just I think the one thing is to take advantage of the downtime as much as you take advantage of the uptime.
Oh, interesting.
One of the things I've learned is when things are, slow, is to develop other projects for yourself. That's kind of how the book happened. When I had some slow time, I just realized that it was important, and a public service, really, to collect work of some really fine courtroom artists and put it into one volume for people. And that was how that came to be. It took 9 years.
Wow.
And I'm now doing another updated version of it because the publisher went out of business, unfortunately, and the book went out of print.
Oh.
But we're in the process of doing an updated version of it, so it'll be back online probably close to the end, in sometime this year. I'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very.
Sorry?
When this goes to air or drops, as the term is now, we'll make sure to include that new project, because that book, that's great that's being updated. That's important.
Yeah, I think it's important to update it because so many things have changed. It came out in 2004, but 2014. It finished really up in 2013. But heck, that's almost going to be 8 years ago.
Yeah,
and
it's a different
happened in 8 years.
Yeah,
a lot. Some kids, it's funny. I deal with young people. We run a mock trial courtroom art program, my colleague and I also spoken to others to speak and volunteer speaking to various high schools and stuff like that. And I remember mentioning Bernie Madoff to somebody, and they said, "Who?"
I forgot to mention that. I wanted to ask you about that case.
Who?
Yeah.
So that people know. People are in the news has a very short shelf life.
Yeah.
So things that will be on board now, all the stuff in the past is gone and forgotten. I mean, somebody said to me, I just did a little talk to a group in a high school, little law group in a high school, and I said, well, when Martha Stewart was on trial?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah. So I think it's important to update it at some point. So anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, I really hate saying goodbye, and it's coming close to saying goodbye. But before, you did remind me that you drew Madoff, and that.
Yes.
Do you mind discussing whatever comes to your mind about that trial, or the attorneys, or the jury, or anything? That's
okay. Just an FYI, there was no trial. He pled guilty.
Okay.
And the most, compelling moment, I think, was when he was sentenced and all those victims stood up and spoke about what had happened to them and how he had stolen all their money.
Yeah.
That was quite a scene.
Yeah.
I mean, they were older people. I'll never forget. This woman got up to the to the podium to speak to the judge. And she was a widow. And she was in her 60s. And Madoff said to her, Madoff said, your husband died. I always said I will take care of you. Sell your house. Give me your money.
Oh, God.
And I will. So she sold her home and got into an apartment and stole everything she had. Now, these victims, fortunately, were able to get back, I think, their initial investment, but certainly they did not get back the money that they thought they were earning, or the interest and the increase in revenue or investment return they would have gotten had they invested it really with a real money manager. So they got something. But I mean, that was like, but at that time, they didn't know they were going to get anything. There was one woman that just wandered around Tribeca, eating out of garbage pails and stuff.
Wow. So,
I mean, he was a bad dude, a really truly bad person. But, I see him all the time.
Oh, you see them all, meaning people? Interesting.
All the time. I'd be careful who you give your money to. That is for sure. Be careful who you do that with.
Yeah.
You know what? They have no fiduciary requirement. Investment managers. They don't.
Oh, interesting.
So, just saying. Anyway.
Well,
the things I've learned, Mitch. The things I've learned.
Well, speaking of what you learned, before I do say goodbye, is there any cases that you want to mention that are particularly important to you or memorable from any period, or could be California, New York?
I would just say the one case that I remember probably the most vividly that I think was one of the best experiences I had was in 1984 covering the John DeLorean trial.
You covered that.
First off, I was drawing.
Wow.
I was the youngest person there by a long shot.
Oh, that's incredible.
All the artists there were gentlemen who were at least twice my age, if not more. And they couldn't have been nicer to me if, they couldn't have been nicer to me. They were, so it was such a great experience for me. And it really helped me start to really develop my ability and my, style. And Bill Robles would always say to me, "You got to develop your own technique. You got to develop your own technique." Because I was always trying to copy him because he was so great, and I could never do it well. So, it was like, what's the point? And I finally came, light bulb went off, and I finally said, "If you can't, you're never going to be able to do it like he's the king at that. You got to become the king at your own technique." Oh. So that was when I started to do that, and we were there every single day.
Wow.
That kind of practice and ability, the ability to do that every single day was phenomenal. And
John DeLorean himself was quite a character. I mean, drawing.
Oh God, yes, and his wife, his fashion model wife.
That's right.
Come on, I mean, it's like, oh my God, I died and gone to heaven. It was one of the greatest experiences I had. Wow. And then he was acquitted to boot. So it was really, but then I moved, and then I was able to move back to New York after that and start working there.
Wow.
But it took me really about 3 or 4 years working as a courtroom artist in LA to really get going and develop and get my sea legs, so to speak. It takes a while when you're a young person to get going. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's too bad people's views are spent in challenged by these things. It's a challenging time of people's lives. I found.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I wouldn't want to go back and do again.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Once you're sort of established and you get going, then it's okay. But it's those beginning years. It's course. It's testing. It's a test in a way, in a lot of ways, and you have to see if you're up to it. So that was a turning point for my career. I'll say that.
John DeLorean.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife, for those who don't remember, what was his wife's name?
Christina Ferraro.
Mm-hmm.
That.
What was she usually? This was the mid '80s. So what would she have been wearing, or what do you remember?
Oh, she wore. She wore every day. She wore a new outfit by Albert Caprara.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God! And they did a whole thing on her. Albert Caprara. I'm gonna look him up. Caprara. Okay. And he, American fashion designer.
I'd imagine.
And
I'd imagine that John DeLorean was wearing very Armani-styled silhouette of his suits, probably.
No, he really wasn't. He was kind of like, wore this same sort of. He was very tall and slim, and he would wear the same.
I misspoke. He was more stuffy than that. He was more Brooks Brothers almost, right? Right.
Yeah. He wasn't anything. He had, and then I think he had a bunch of plastic surgery and stuff.
Oh,
the white and all. But she was a real eye candy of that style. I'll tell you that. Yeah. And oh God, it was just what a. Oh, here it is. Let's see this scene here. All right. Well, I don't have a picture of it, but at any rate, wearing Capraro. Oh God. Anyway, she every day was a new outfit. Yeah. Every single day.
That's great.
Every single day style. Great. It was just great. At any rate, nothing's come close to that since. I have to say.
Well, Elizabeth Williams, thank you so much for your generosity and time and talking about these things that I think, are as important as sculpture or film or anything else in the arts. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate your interest, and thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Be safe out there.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I don't like goodbyes, so I'll see you soon, folks. Thank you.